This is cool. Trevor DeVage, thank you for joining me on the Homilist podcast.
Yeah, man, this is great. I'm looking forward to being a part of this, man.
Yeah.
You just before you started recording, we were talking about other people been on here, and I'm in very humble like mindset of the company that I'm in. So either you're shooting at like fish in the bottom of the barrel now, because or whatever. But I'm excited to be a part of it, man.
Right.
In ministry or my heartbeat. So this is awesome, man.
Well, let me tell you something. There's been some really great guests on here. I mean, they've all had some great contribution to make. But there's something about you, and when somebody keeps bringing your name up over and over and over, did you get a hold of Trevor yet? Did you get a hold of Trevor yet?
Man.
I'm like, yo, I haven't got a hold of him. I reached out to him. We're trying to connect. He's out of country. He's going to come back at some point. I'll get a hold of him. Did you get a hold of Trevor yet? I bet you every 2 weeks since I started this thing, I've got an email or a text message. Did you get a hold of Trevor yet?
Yeah, well, I can tell you that there's no pressure in that right there at all, man.
My good gosh.
Of course, I joke with a lot of my friends especially in our movement of most people hang out with me because they feel like they need a non-Christian friend to lead to Christ. And so they spend time with me to see if they can do that. So it's good.
Now, maybe this is the reason why they keep saying, did you get a hold of Trevor?
Yeah.
They're like, hey, you two should get together and maybe some Christian will find you guys and convert you both.
Well, that's good. Maybe somebody will hear this and we'll both know Jesus after this.
I'm beginning to understand why people kept saying, did you get a hold of Trevor? I think he's lost like you. I think that's
yeah. Well, that's good. We're going to be in very good company together then. That's good.
I think this is a setup. I think it's a blind date. That's what I think it is. I think this is a blind date.
It's an intervention. Actually, I think there's somebody somewhere else actually listening to this right now.
So. Like, you know what? Just for future ministry reasons, we need to get these two together. Let's see how many cuss words they say. see how many cigar lounges they plan on hitting together, and
all those wonderful things. Yeah.
We'll figure out if we want to hire them at the next place or not. So
that'd be great.
So here's what was great. What was really, really cool was your name was brought up. Hey, get a hold of Trevor DeVage. He would be a really great one. And just shortly after that is when your blog post that just kind of went viral. That was was that the 5 I did 2 of them back to back, the 5 confessions of a messy pastor.
That kind of took off by storm. I didn't really anticipate that. You know how you do something and you just think, man, I'm just sharing my heart, and then all of a sudden it just kind of blows up and you don't anticipate it. And I think when you try to be viral, it's not really viral. That's just convoluted. But just I think what I learned through that was just authenticity. People just and I think a lot of pastors, fair and unfair, don't feel like they can be that honest. And I've learned more often than not. I've built an entire ministry career off of authenticity. And I've learned some people don't like that and some people do. So, but I think pastors in general, we got to have a space where we can be honest. And I'm just who I am. So most people either they really like me or they really don't. I wish it wasn't that way a lot of the times, but that's just kind of the world in which we live, So that's cool. It's cool you brought that up, man, because I was watching the numbers on that thing in analytics, and I'm just like, what is going on? Like I forgot about it. I posted it, walked away, and I was doing some traveling in that same time frame, and like I use Squarespace or not Square, it's Squarespace. Yeah, I use Squarespace website, and so I get analytic notifications, and like my phone blew up, man. I was like, what's happened? Did I like I do something I wasn't supposed to? Like, did I break the internet? I felt like Wreck-It Ralph for like a little bit. And then I realized it was this post. It was a bunch of pastors, man, really around the country. And I was really cool to see how church people responded to it too, because I don't think the average church person, it's not a bad statement. I just don't think they have a clue how hard ministry really is. And I don't think the average pastor that gets into it knows that either. Yeah. Honestly. At least nobody told me that.
Right.
So I knew the call was big, but I didn't realize how hard some of this stuff really, really is.
Yeah. And what you forget about is just the subtlety of how hard it is. And that sounds strange to say it that way, but the things that balancing that internal mechanism of pleasing people and telling the truth. And you wouldn't think like, oh, that's not hard. Like I'm kind of a punk when it comes to that kind of thing. I mean, I can kind of be, you're gonna have to get over it. You're gonna have to, but it doesn't mean that it alleviates the weight of feeling like you're going to let people down, feeling like there's higher expectations on you than you can actually accomplish, dealing with the depression stuff. One of the questions that I've asked a lot of these guys on this podcast is, how do we balance family breakdown, marriage breakdown, kid breakdown in the middle of trying to lead a church? Because so much of that can be, there's this stigma maybe, or to where you got to have it figured out, Trevor. You got to have it figured out. If you're going to be the guy that's going to stand up front and do this kind of deal, then your kids better be good. Your marriage better be good. You better have all the answers to everything. And if we weren't on this podcast, I would explain this a different way. But you listen to people tell you that you're good, or you listen to people tell you you're a great leader or a great speaker or a great creator, and you listen to that, and then something weird happens on the inside. I mean, it goes back. I mean, it goes back to the garden. There's a snake and there's some fruit and there's a lady and somebody's saying some stuff. And for whatever reason, I'm starting to believe maybe I am the cat's meow. Maybe I am the bee's
finding your own hype, man.
Eating your own bull crap, like that's out of control, So
the problem is you put sprinkles on it and you think it tastes good until you get into the center of it, and that's, and I think the one thing I think I've had to wrestle through, I wrestle on both sides of the spectrum. This is the schizophrenia of ministry, right? So I wrestle on the side of like gut check all the time. Like I've got people around me that, man, I'm in a mentor group of guys from around the country that we meet a couple times a year. We're on a text thread together all the time. Some of the best guys in the church. I know you ought to have every one of those guys on this. I mean, they're unbelievable guys. But I love that we can get together and, man, we can talk each other off the ledge, or we can kick each other in the butt. And we've got full access to do that to one another. I think the other side I deal with is when people start telling me how great I am. I know how great I'm not. And I don't know if that's now I've turned this, I know it sounds like so cliche, but I'm 40 years old now. And so, but I think that I'm at a place now where I'm like, I know all my crap and I know what I'm not good at. And when people start blowing smoke at me, I find people really, my wife's the best at this, of just reminding me of, here's what you're really awesome at. I don't know what they're seeing because that's not you at all. And I'm like, okay, good. I just want to make sure I'm still in reality.
Right.
But it's one of those, I think now I lean the other direction of, man, I know I'm not that great. And I have the privilege of stand on large platform a lot and talk, and, people just see that. They see you talk and they see you engage and they see you funny. But I think for me, that balance is that we never stand on our platform here and tell people we got our crap together. In fact, I'm the antithesis of that. I let people know, I'm like, man, if you're going to come to our church, we've said this from the platform. I'm like, our family's not perfect. My wife and I, like, if my wife's having a bad morning, I'm not expecting her to walk into church and be the perfect pastor's wife, whatever that is. I don't think that exists, but we could debate that a whole day. But if my wife's having a bad day, I need my wife to be able to have a bad day, and it's okay. If my kids are a hot mess in the hallway, and I got 2 daughters, so there's a good chance one of them's going to be a hot mess when they walk in the building, and one's 15 tomorrow and one's going to be 13 this fall. I mean, there's a good chance that they're going to have an off day. And I'm not going to put any undue pressure on my kids or my wife to have to be something that somebody thinks they should be, because I don't put that on myself in front of our church. And so what's really cool is our church has embraced that over the last, it took some time, but over the last 7 years of being here. And I told the elders, this may be a rabbit trail, but when I was interviewing, they were like, is there anything in your life that would disqualify you from ministry? And I was like, yes, everything in my life disqualifies me from ministry. So does yours. And one of the guys was like, that's the best answer I've ever heard. And I'm like, I don't know the best truth. Like, I'm not going to lie to you and say that, no, man, there's nothing in my life that disqualifies me. Sin disqualifies me from ministry. So yes, absolutely. So if you guys are not good with me being like, if you want the Messiah, don't hire me because I suck at it. But if you want a human being that's trying to figure all this out with you, and my family's allowed to figure it out too, then we're good, And so, but it's a hard balance, man. Like, and I think now more than ever, I've had a couple acquaintances commit suicide that are in the ministry over the last 2 years, and I'm sure you've seen all that as well. And It's a real deal, man. Like the schizophrenia of ministry. I don't think people understand the toll that it takes on you mentally. I just don't think they get it. I don't think we get it, honestly. So not to chase a bunch of rabbits, man.
No, that's great. Well, it's like I told you, whatever makes you tick. I mean, I want to talk about that. I mean,
Yeah.
that's yeah, and you're 100% right. I'm in a excuse me. I'm in a Bible study with several young men from our church, 20, 25 to 30.
Isn't it funny that that's young now?
I know I'm the old dude. I'm 41 in the Bible study.
Know,
like
man.
I was the stud. Like when I showed up, I was the young stud, 10 years ago.
I got people on my staff that could be my kids now. It's crazy.
So funny. Yeah. I was like, I'm sitting in it. So we're talking about a Bible study the other day. And this material suggested, you need to get some guys underneath you who are at the earlier seasons of life, and then you need to get some people around you who are kind of at the later seasons of life. And it's funny because there's like the 25 to 28 group, and then there's the 31-year-old guy, and then there's the 41-year-old guy. And they were all like, well, they looked at my buddy who's 31, like, well, we got you, we can talk about. And then he kind of turns and looks at me, and he's like, you're the old one. Like you are, you're the one that's in the fall.
You're supposed to be wise now, bro. You're supposed to be wise.
I'm like, listen, here's what's going on right now. I know less about what's going on in the world than I did 10 years ago.
Bro, I literally just said to a guy 2 weeks ago, I'm dumber at 40 than I was at 20.
Oh yeah, absolutely. Absolutely. No, I wouldn't go back. No,
not at all.
I wouldn't go back. But boy, there was some comfort in thinking that I actually knew some stuff versus where I am now, to where I'm like,
I would have kicked 20. I would have kicked 20-year-old me's butt. I mean, absolutely. I'd be like, bro, you're an idiot. Stop talking. Listen more. Like, you don't know everything about the church. You don't know everything about life. Here I am doing youth ministry, giving parenting advice, and I didn't have any kids. I'm like, seriously. So it's funny. My hindsight, is always brilliant, but yeah, it's really funny, man.
Yeah,
for sure.
Well, it's sitting in those groups. So I've got this early morning Bible study with these young dudes, and then I've got this group to where there's a couple of elders from my church. There's some other guys who've come in, just older guys, and I go to that meeting, and that's a very cathartic meeting as well, because I get to see these young guys and they're amping up, talking about, we're going to have a baby and we don't know what we're going to do. And I'm like, I got a 15-year-old and I got a 12-year-old, and, it's like, wait till you get a 15 and a 12-year-old,
that's where I'm living right now, bro. Today.
Exactly right. We just went to prom for the first time this year.
I don't like those words.
He shows up at the door. And he's a dapper son of a gun. I mean, a dapper looking guy. And I'm looking at him like, and he starts talking, and I'm thinking to myself, man, he's a bright kid. He's a sharp kid. But he's 17. He knows nothing.
Yeah, and I remember being 17 and being kind of quick on my feet. And I'm like, I know you, bro. Like, I'm you. And if, I've got, my daughters are beautiful. I got 2 daughters, and it's funny because when I go to the high school, I do some character and leadership classes over there, and I teach, I preach for the football team's chapels, and but I walk in, I'm usually wearing a black t-shirt, black jeans. I've got almost full sleeves on both arms, and I usually wear a black like flat bill, and my daughter is hilarious because she loves it. But I walk in and I'm like, I told her, I said, you know why daddy looks like a felon? I said, because I want every boy in this school to think I might be postal enough to kill them. And if they mess with you, I want them to know I'm coming hard.
The message I get back from my daughter, she says, all the guys in my class say, man, Mr. Ellis is a beast. I'm like, keep it up.
Yep. You just exactly keep up the beast. That's exactly what we're looking for.
That's why I'm mean mugging when I go in there. That's why I'm mean mugging. Don't think I'm not.
I taught a character leadership class, I think last semester, and I stood in front of the class, and the coach that teaches the class, I was like, don't tell them what I do. And a couple of kids knew, but I walked in, I said, hey, some of you guys may know my daughter. Her name's Ella, and some of them nod their heads. And I said, hey, to any of you guys in here, you don't know what I do for a living. And I said, no, I just got out of jail. I said, but I can promise you this. I love Jesus. And if you mess with my daughter, you're going to meet him a whole lot faster. and everybody kind of nervous laughed in the room. And I was like, I'm still not laughing. And Ella came out and she was like, Dad, that was awesome. Thanks for saying that. And I was like, yeah, that a girl.
That's good. That's
as
good.
long as she's happy with Dad threatening people, I'm good.
That's perfect. That's perfect. Yeah, that's great. That's
so
great.
That's from our interview, but
no, man, this is great. I understand now. I understand exactly why it was get with Trevor. Get with Trevor. There's a kindred spirit with Trevor. You need to get with Trevor.
Yeah, see, you and I need to start like the Rebel Yell podcast of pastors.
Absolutely,
man.
absolutely. You say when. You say when, because we can.
Hey, you have no idea how legitly, seriously, jokingly I'm saying that.
you make the phone call, pal. You make the phone call, and this thing's a done deal.
We'll figure it out, man.
Oh, it's a done deal.
What else you want to sift through, man? Because we got so much good stuff.
I know you don't have a lot of time either.
We'll work it out, man. I'll sift through with you as long as we can push the envelope a little bit.
Yeah. The number one thing here when it comes to the ministry side, when we talk about the depression aspect, or we talk about the anxiety of ministry, we talk about just the weight that it can really put on a guy. And that's so crazy because of what Jesus says, my burden is light, and it's kind of like, why does it not feel that way? And I must be doing some part of this on my own. I must be doing some part of this on my own. Going to those kind of meetings, just like where your situation is, in your church, and you got people who will check you on stuff and be in your life. That's what I'm experiencing. And you know what? I'm in a smaller church. I'm in a church of 175, 200 people. And these people are wide open, letting me be me,
That's awesome, bro.
I mean, when they hired me, I said to them, look, I'm not in a good place. I'm not ready. I've been in ministry, but I've been out a while. I'm not in a good spot. They're like, oh, that is so honest. You're going to do so great at this. I'm like, what? What?
That's why you need to be there, bro. Because
exactly. So good.
They've embraced that, man. That's
absolutely.
So cool.
It's such a healthy place, full of young men, just young studs, and that's been such a good deal. And I always feel bad for those guys who get out there in ministry, and they get in that place to where they got to meet that expectation. Whoever's making that expectation, is that what you think is going on?
Yeah, I mean, I think sometimes we put it on ourselves. I think in the church world, especially, and I think it's this way in corporate world. We don't talk about it in church world, and I think that we put this. We look around and, people look at, like, I look at churches of, like, I'm friends with Brockett. You talked about Aaron Brockett. Man, I've watched Aaron blow up Traders Point in the last 5-6 years. I mean, it's just gone crazy. And I think we put these expectations on ourselves of, if my church isn't blowing up in the first 5 years, then I'm not successful, or I'm doing something wrong. But then I got guys that'll look at our church and we're running a couple thousand and they'll go, man, gosh, if we could just get there. Well, there's no number that you're there, because it just never, the cycle of, once you get on the success train, you got to always one up yourself. And I think we're carrying burdens of success that we weren't ever meant to carry. That's why, like, I stopped reporting numbers to Outreach Magazine and the Christian Standard. And they call me every year and they're like, hey, why don't you send us your numbers? And I finally just went, like, it doesn't bother me that people do. It's not good for my soul, because my name will be on a list that I'm going to look at and go, I'm missing the mark because there's 30 churches in front of me. That's so not healthy. That's there's an expectation we put on ourselves that bigger means healthy. That's not necessarily true. I had a friend once say, I can't remember who said it now. I used to, like, if you read something one time, you're like, that person once said, and then you can't remember. So you're like, I always say,
right.
But I heard a friend of mine, and I can't remember where the context, but he said, it's like pastors get together and they have Chinus envy. They stand around and talk about how big their churches are. And so now when I hang out with people, it's funny, since that moment, people are like, so how's your church doing? And I know what the question means.
Right.
So grown. And I've started asking the question completely different. It's just, man, how are you doing? Because that question, that they usually start with, man, the church is doing really good. I didn't ask you how your church is doing. How are you doing?
Yeah.
Because I don't give a rip how your church is doing, because if you're not healthy, your church will eventually follow. And if you are healthy, your church will eventually follow. And so I think we put a lot of pressure on church health, and we don't put a lot of pressure on pastor health. And I've got my elders, man, they love me. They make margin in my life. I get a study break every summer. Like I can call them any day and go, hey, I need to take a couple days and go. They're like, why are you calling us? Do what you need to do to be healthy. We want you in for 30 years, not for 30 minutes. And so, but I know a lot of guys don't have that. And there's a lot of guys on the island, and there's a lot of guys isolated, and there's guys in churches your size that are desperate, man. They're grabbing for straws, and their church doesn't support them. Their elders don't support them. They put a standard in place that they've got to be the preacher, the secretary, the youth minister, the children's minister. They got to make every hospital call, do every wedding, do every funeral. And then they wonder why their preaching struggles. They have like an hour a week to give to it.
Yeah.
You know, and I'm in a place, thankfully, where, man, I've got a team that's awesome. I've got elders that are awesome. I don't have to do all of those things. But it's hard, man, when you feel the pressure to have to do everything. Jesus was Jesus, and he didn't do all that. You know, he empowered people. But I think the mental health of pastors, it's coming into the light, which is good. I think for a long time, it was just swept under a rug, and guys were having moral failures, and they were blaming it on, you know, all sorts of things, but they didn't want to, the church didn't want to take responsibility for, maybe we've not helped this. We didn't cause it, but maybe we didn't help it. You know, and so anytime I can get with pastors, I don't care what size their church is. I mean, I hang out with guys in churches of 20, 30,000 people, and I hang out with guys in churches of 50 people. And there's unhealth on both sides of those equations. And at the end of the day, you realize we're just all a bunch of human beings trying to not screw this up.
Yeah. We just had this conversation the other day with a group of guys, and we were talking about how, you know, in our 20s and our 30s, it's all about how good you look doing it.
Yeah.
And then once you get to 40, at least for me, maybe even 35, once you kind of get to that place, you forget all about, do I look good doing it? Because the scoreboard's gone. We're not playing with bats and balls anymore. Now we're swinging swords because this mother wants to kill us, you know? I mean, this thing is... it's trying to take us down. And so we just got to finish. Like, we just have to finish this thing. You know, does that resonate with you?
Well, that's one of my favorite scriptures, Jude 23, rescue others by snatching them from the flames of judgment. And I've literally said it again Sunday. I tell our church almost on a weekly, if not monthly basis, if you don't smell like smoke, then you're not doing it right. Right. If you're not so close to the pits of hell, snatching people away, if this is just a Kiwanis club for you, this is not the church for you. Right. If you want just a social membership somewhere, go join a country club. They probably got a pool, and it's probably a lot bigger than ours. You know, so I'm like, we're not in this for, I think the older I'm getting, and that's funny to say at 40, because some people are like, oh, you're just a young kid. And I'm like, I don't know. My body tells me differently this morning, but, the older I get, the more I realize that this thing has an end date, and I don't know when that end date is, so I better make sure I'm lopping off as many heads to get people rescued as possible. And I don't have time to play church anymore. And there's a lot of people playing church. There's not a lot of people that are the church. And
Trevor, you realize that with an attitude like that and talking to people like that, you might not boost your numbers up very high if you keep talking truth like that.
Yeah, the problem is Jesus was the worst church growth strategist on the planet. I remember in John 6, I think was it like verse like 65, 66, where I mean, hundreds have walked away, and he looks at the 12, he's like, y'all gonna leave too? And I just laugh at that statement because I think there was a question in the, like, you sent me like some pre-questions. I think Jesus is funny everywhere in scripture. There's not like just one moment, but like that moment even is funny to me, that Jesus, because he knows our hearts, and he's like, y'all out too? Because if you're, just go ahead and leave if you're gone, but this is the cost of discipleship. And today, if Jesus were growing a church a day, he would have, like, the consultants would be coming in going, Jesus, you're not doing this right. Like, and man, you need to accept those people where they are. And you need to, hey, back off on your truth a little bit to get them in the door. And I'm like, man, I don't know. I think truth's truth, no matter how you slice it. So, and here's what I'm finding more and more. The more we tell the truth, the more people want to hear it.
Absolutely.
That's the dichotomy. You know, and we're dealing with all sorts of things culturally today that I didn't deal with in student ministry. I didn't deal with as a kid. Like, we're dealing with gender issues. We're dealing with, you know, marriage has been redefined. You know, things that were taboo are now like totally acceptable. And so, it's funny because people, you probably get this too. People look at me and think, oh, he's probably liberal and he's probably, he's probably soft pedaling the gospel. And the reality is that I may look like I got a little bit of this liberal edge, but actually, I'm actually pretty massively conservative when it comes to theology.
Right.
I just don't talk politics because I didn't come to win people to a politician. I came to win them to Jesus, and I just don't have time to do that. So if people want me to tell them who to vote for, I don't know, vote for the person, I guess, that you resonate with. But I'm not going to stand on stage and tell you to vote for. I'm going to tell you about Jesus. I'm not electing a pastor. I'm electing a president. When politician stuff rolls around, I don't care enough to waste my breath on that from a platform.
Right.
Social media or a physical platform.
Yeah.
But I really think, when you start telling the truth, here's what it weeds out. It doesn't weed out people far from God. It weeds out those that claim to be close to him.
Agreed.
And a lot of the people that I offend are usually church people that have been in this for 30, 40 years. And when you start pressing against the things that they've held as their theology of truth, and you realize really quickly it's just pharisaical, they either change their ways, which is I've seen very rarely, or they go somewhere else where they can continue to live that out. And I'm sure they're going to be in heaven. I don't question that. I'm just not sure which section. We're all going to be there. I tell people all the time, man, we lost somebody to another church, not to hell. If I'm going to lose you to hell, I'll chase after you. If I lose you to another church, okay, we live in a country where there's one on every corner. Go for it. I love you.
That's right.
But it's hard, man. Truth for people that have claimed truth for so long and I'm not saying I got it all right. Like, I'm learning every day. I've got less right. Sure. I've got the other way. But what I do know is this: I spend more time with Jesus now than I ever have, which is an indictment on me early on in ministry.
Absolutely.
I realize that prayer is the linchpin of all things we do. And that if I'm healthy, my church will get healthy. And if I'm not healthy, my church will eventually not be healthy.
Unhealthy people attract unhealthy people. Healthy people attract healthy people. Trevor, I went through a situation probably 8 years ago in our church. And I went to my elders and I said, hey, listen, I've got to get my situation figured out. And I talked to one of the other staff guys. And then I went before the church and I told him, I said, porn has just wrecked my life. And I need to talk about this for just a minute. And I told the congregation, talked to the elders about it, talked to the staff about it. And I said, this is where I'm at. My wife and I are working through this, and I just finished the program, and I'm 40 days clean. And they're looking at me like, we've been going to church here for, a couple of years, What happened was immediately there was this revolving door that opened up, and people started filing out, and different people started coming in.
Yep.
And the healthy people started showing up. The healthier I got, the healthier the church became. And that, you were 100%. I haven't heard anybody say that in a long time, but you're 100% right.
Well, what's funny is the healthier you become, you will attract people that aren't healthy, but they're coming to get healthy.
Absolutely right.
Where the other side is when you're healthy and people are there that think they're healthy, but they're actually sick. They're like, I'm gonna go find a different doctor. Mm-hmm. And you're like, that's fine. You can go find a different doctor. Your symptoms are going to be the same until you get healthy. Like I don't know if you saw it yesterday. I posted a blog yesterday. There's a couple in our church.
Yeah.
And dude, it's hilarious, man. They got these 2 Great Danes, 3 pit bulls. Their story is as raw as the day is long. They're coming in from addiction.
Right.
They're clean. Their dogs help with their recovery. Dude, you ought to go watch their videos, man. These dogs they're humans, man. They're hilarious.
That's funny.
They've got over people. They've got 350,000 followers on Facebook, and it's crazy. But here's what's happening. So, and one thing I do want to unpack with you that I'm really excited about is our online campus stuff that we're doing, because it's just super cool what's happening there. But what's happening as a result of their ministry of honesty is people that had never darkened the doors of a church are coming to our online campus in droves right now.
Wow.
From all over the country. And they're like, this is my church because I'm on their board, but I became a part of their board because they're doing so much good stuff. And I'm
right.
They tried to raise money to get vet bills paid for one of their dogs through their fan base. They needed $8,000. They raised like $35,000 in like 2 hours. Dog people crazy, man.
Yeah.
I'm like, man, I need a dog and need it to have surgery. That'd be amazing. But what happened was out of that, they were like, we can't keep this money. Like, we need to do something. So now they're starting a recovery program. Their ultimate goal is a recovery home that brings in people in recovery to pair with dogs that need recovery, and they recover each other. All with a gospel bent. So as I'm processing through that, I'm like, man, they came into our church just on a whim of an invite. Week one, they sign up for Rooted, which is our discipleship pathway. It's a 10-week experience. The day one they were here, they signed up for it. Out of that, they were both baptized. Out of that, now they're just bringing people. Like, and I'm like, they're going, hey, we were sick and now we're not. And it wasn't because of me. I had very minimal to do with that. But to come into a place where they found health in the people leading, then they're like, we can get healthy here. We're not going to get more sick here. We can get healthy here. And so when I start seeing like people that claim to be well infecting other people, I lose my ever-loving mind, because I'm like, you need it. I love you, but you got to go. And that's not popular either. I mean, people don't like pastors to say that. We're supposed to love everybody. I can love you. I don't have to like you.
Over there.
Yeah, I can love you from across the street. I mean, I could love you from, and I don't mean to sound as harsh as it is, but I'm in a place now where I'm just like, you know what, life's too short. There's not a lot of time, and I'm going to snatch as many people as possible with me from the flames of judgment that I can. And so that's, again, you start telling truth, and people will start coming for truth. But if you as a pastor, and I love what you just shared that story as, but if you as a pastor are not healthy, your church can be healthy and you can be unhealthy, and eventually the health of your church will not raise the health of the pastor. Your health of the pastor will bring down the health of the church.
Absolutely right. Yeah, absolutely right. So what are you doing online? What's your online thing that you're?
Man, I got to tell you, because I had this epiphany a couple of years ago. I came from Dallas, great church in Dallas, Compass Christian Church, and I was a part of helping grow multi-site there. Now I think they're on 6 sites or 7 sites, and it's in-person preaching at every location. And that's really where I got to start preaching on a regular, was there. And very healthy model. And, we were building buildings and meeting in schools, and great stuff. I came to Cincinnati with a pretty good gauge of how multi-site works. I oversaw multi-site for a couple of years. And so a couple of years into here, we kind of had a golden opportunity, one of those opportunities in church world where it drops in your lap and you're like, okay, this is way too good not to jump on this. And so we took the risk, we did it, raised $250,000 to do it. And then it failed miserably. Now, there was a lot of factors in why it failed miserably that I won't get into on here, but at the end of the day, it didn't work. But in the process of that, we weren't doing anything online at the time other than just posting sermons 2 days after I preached, typical what most churches are doing. And I woke up in the middle of the night when I'm like, are we making this more complicated than we need to with this multi-site thing? And I start Googling, like, I know, like Groshell has their online campus, and they're kind of pioneers in that, and Community Christian up in Naperville has it. And a lot of people are doing online stuff, but I was like, is anybody doing anything in the realm of like house campuses or micro churches? And I couldn't find anything. So I called this guy, Joey, who's now our online campus guy, but at the time he was working at another church. And I said, man, I just think it's crazy. We spend anywhere from $350,000 to $500,000 to start a multi-site campus. You got to staff it. You got to have space. You got overhead. You've got equipment. I'm like, is it unfeasible to reach a demographic of people now, an entire generation that is online all the time? Is it possible to engage them in real engagement online? And we started dreaming. I was like, what if we start a house campuses where you got 10, 15, 20, maybe 30 people in your living room? You invite them over, you have brunch. We talk to you before service. We talk to you after service. We have online Bible study during the week. And the ultimate dream would be to go to these different houses a couple times a year and preach from their living room back to our main campus in Mason. So we start kicking this around. I was like, man, we need to hire a guy. And then I realized I had the guy sitting in my office. I was like, why don't you just come work for me? And to his credit, he said yes, and I didn't let off. And so here we are a year and a half in, and here's what we're seeing. And we do, like a lot of churches with online ministry, it's not right or wrong. It's just they do an average. They'll do like 2 people to every device, 3 people to every device. We do 1-to-1. So unless you tell us how many people are with you, we just count you as one person. We also don't count you unless you're on for at least 25 minutes. A lot of people, if you hit their website for a minute, you get counted. I'm sorry, pastors, if you hear this and I just called you out, but that's asinine. Stop doing that.
Click, 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 click.
That's why your outreach numbers are so big in the magazine. You may have to edit this later. I'm sorry.
Nope, I will most certainly not do that.
But so on a given weekend, we know that we've had for at least 25 minutes, somewhere in the neighborhood of probably 1,000 people, close to 1,000 people online with us. And most experts would tell you we've probably got closer to 3,000 or 4,000 people with us on a weekend. But what I love about it is not what's happening inside the service, but man, we had a guy from California who grew up Hindu, met one of our members on a plane, started attending online, went through 10-week Bible study with our online campus pastor on Monday nights at 8:00. Then he went through our foundations class online, and then he wanted to get baptized. And we were like, bro, we will come to California and baptize you. And he was like, no, I want to come to Ohio. And I'm like, no, we live in Ohio. Let us come to California. And he was like, I've never been in a church in my life, and I want to come to my church. So he flew from California to here, stayed with the guy he met on the plane. That guy baptized him. But there's people will be like, well, online's not real ministry. Those aren't real people. I'm like, well, I can tell you he is. I can tell you the 7 other people that have come here to get baptized from all over the country are real people. And I can tell you the 7 house campuses we have, 6 in Ghana, Africa, where there's been probably 75 people baptized this year. And the house church in Pakistan, where there's like 70 people crammed into looks like a bombed out building with a laptop, and they're singing with us and worshiping with us. Man, it's as real as it gets. And so I had this epiphany a couple years ago, and I don't know, where did you go to college, Jared?
I went to Ozark Christian College.
So I went to Lincoln, and you were probably there about the same time I was. I was 97 to 01. And I remember when I got to college, I don't know if you experienced this at Ozark, but all we were talking about was 2 things: postmodernism, and Gen X, which was my generation. And I'm the last year of Gen X. In fact, I think they've relabeled us. I think I'm something else now, but I'm staying with Gen X. And I remember they were talking about how to reach my generation. And I thought, I raised my hand in some class, here I am, this punk freshman. And I was like, so what about the generation behind us? They didn't have a name yet. I was like, because if you haven't reached me by now, you're probably not going to reach me. And all I got was, man, we got to reach Gen X. And I was like, that's not a good enough answer for me. And now here we are, fast forward 20 years, and we're now talking about how we miss millennials and we miss Gen X. And now all we're talking about how to reach millennials. Millennials are 19 to 36 now. And so I'm not saying throw them out. I'm just saying now I'm looking at my kids who are this Gen Z, and nobody's talking about them. Nobody's doing anything. So I told our guys, I said, we're going to focus on that generation because they're becoming adults this next year. I'm like, so let's focus on them. Let's keep ministering to millennials. Let's pray to God Gen Xers want to be a part of this. And baby boomers are going to be gone in the next 20 years. I'm like, so let's focus on Gen Z. So we've just focused all of our energy on how can we more effectively reach into this space and redeem online. And what's crazy is like, this is where pastors, they'll lean in because they're like, oh, your numbers, whatever. We brought in over $120,000 in the last year from people that don't live in our state, our country, have ever darkened the doors of our building. So pastors, if you don't think it's real, there's a stat for you because most of us care about what the finances look like. My overhead was $15,000 is what it cost me to launch online. Now we've got a staff member that oversees it, but he oversees a bunch of other things. But here's where I'm at with it is I think pastors have a vanity issue. And I was one of them where if you don't have seats actually filled in your building, that must not count. And I came to this place where I'm like, if I could reach 50,000 people in the next 2 years and change a little bit of what I do, or I could reach 5,000 people in the next 5 years and I have to change a lot of what we do, which is better. I'd rather spend less money and reach more people. So, so we could legitimately reach 50,000 people pretty easily, I think, in the next 2 years. Real people, they're not fake people. But every time it's funny, when I started rolling this idea out with a lot of pastors, large church pastors, they looked at me, they're like, yeah, but we really care about people getting to one of our campuses. And I'm like, this is about you. This is not about them. This is about you. And they started looking at me like I had worms growing out of my face when I started talking about this stuff. And I felt like a unicorn for a while. Like, it was like, maybe I'm an idiot. And then I was like, or maybe we're onto something that nobody else is seeing yet. Now what's funny is here we are a year and a half later, and I just sent Joey to like 3 of the largest churches in the country. It's just funny. We got churches like 15, 16, 17 times bigger than us asking how to do online ministry. I just laugh because they're like, well, we've got like $1 million. I'm like, well, get rid of that. You don't need that. I've got an iPhone. It works great.
Right.
But I mean, there's a lot of setup that we've done in the background of this, but now we've got, I think we've got 45 people on Zoom calls during the week. It's face-to-face like this, doing Bible study together from all over the globe. We've got facilitators. We've got 24-hour chat. So if you're having an issue at 2 a.m, I promise you, if you get online on our site, it's going to kick to somebody and you're going to get to chat with somebody live and like that. I come in pre-service and post-service and engage our online campus. I talk to them. They can ask me questions. I can give them answers. We engage one another. Like I do a Facebook Live thing on Sunday mornings from right here in my office. And it's funny how many of them are on early. I've learned online church people show up to church actually early, where regular church people walk in 10 minutes later with their coffee in their hand. It's just been very interesting to watch. So this year, we're actually going to start going to some of these houses and like actually preaching from their living room back to our main campus. And I think that's going to be a game changer because we want them to understand you are a part of us. You are the church. And I just have become way less concerned about how many seats I fill in a building and way more concerned about how many people we can reach in the shortest amount of time. And so like there'd be people that could say, well, this isn't a real conversation because you guys are just looking at each other on a video screen. Well, I would argue this is probably one of the best conversations I've had with somebody in quite a while. And I would have zero qualms. Like the Rebel Yell podcast thing's in my head right now from where I said that earlier.
Yeah.
But like we could probably start a full podcast right now and have never been in the same room together. And you know what I'm saying?
That might need to be the point. Like that might even sell even better. The fact that I've never seen you face to face,
right?
And this is a really good conversation. You know what I mean?
Yeah. I mean, and so we're just learning. Like I can launch. So now I got a bar here locally. A guy in our church owns a bar. It's called the Monkey Bar, and it's a kind of historical landmark, and he's blown it up. I mean, it's doing awesome. This summer we're putting a house campus in his bar. There's 40 TVs. He's not open till noon. So for the first month, we're just going to say, we're going to try to get 20, 30 people from our campus here in Mason. It's about 10 minutes away. And it's going to be the location for people that won't come to a church. So we're going to say, here's the only stipulation. If you go, bring one person with you that won't go to church. And for the first month, there's a food truck here called the Brunch Truck. We're going to have it there. We're going to pay for brunch for anybody to come to church for the first month. And just love on those people in a digital format where they can walk in. And the owner was so funny. He's like, could I serve like mimosas? I'm like, I don't care what you serve. Like I want people to love Jesus. And if a mimosa or Bloody Mary gets them in the door, discounted, bring them. I don't care. Right. And I'm sure somebody will send me an email about that'll hear this later. That's fine. I get emails about crap all the time. But the reality is all things, all people, so that some may know Christ. And so we're going into places like that. There's an upscale karaoke bar in downtown Cincinnati that one of our members is part owner in. I'm like, Saturday nights, that thing is banging. I mean, it's called Tokyo Kitty. So that only tells you what it's like. Like, I feel like it's kind of some weird strip club, but it's not a bar. Right. But they're going to like potentially promote with cards on Saturday night while karaoke is going on for us. Come back tomorrow morning if you're looking for a church that's unlike any other church you've been a part of. Cool. But what is that? So here's what it cost me to start an online campus at my buddy's bar. $0. Right. At the very most, I buy an Apple TV. I just launched the campus. Right. You know what I'm saying? Yeah. I don't know if you know Brad Prunty or Nick Plassman. They're up in One Line Church in Wheaton. And
I know the name Prunty. Yeah.
Yeah. You need those guys on here. They would be, they're rock stars. But they just merged with a church out of their church plant in Wheaton. They're doing online ministry. We consulted with them and they're really good friends of mine, and they're doing online ministry like day one when they opened. And they're getting better at it every week, but we're just going in going, guys, this is not rocket science. Like, I feel like, why are we the only ones that see this? And a really funny side story. We had a guy in our church who developed the back end for Siri and sold it to Apple. And so I'm guessing he did okay. But he called Life Church to figure out, because now we're working with beacon technology and geofencing and all this kind of stuff. And so he calls Life Church to see if we might be able to like geo fence into the Bible app. And while he's on the phone with him, he hacks into Life Church's back into their system. And I think he was on the phone with Bobby Grunwald, who started YouVersion. And he starts telling them things about them that he shouldn't know. And they're like, how do you know that? He goes, well, I'm in the back end of your system. And they're like, what do you mean? He's like, yeah, I hacked in the back into your system. I'm reading all this stuff. And so just hilarious is like for like 2 months after that, like Groeschel and Grunwald like start liking all of our stuff on Instagram. But I know there was a conversation of like, why is some church in Ohio that we've never heard of able to get into the back end of our system? But now it's like, and they're not trying to do anything we're doing. They're already doing it. But it's just interesting to me to see that I think we've tapped into something that, because I think church in general has got to shift in the next 5 years or the church becomes massively irrelevant, massively irrelevant. And I think it's authenticity first. And then if we're going to meet people where they are, we can say, well, the internet thing is Al Gore created and it's just a fad. Well, I think it's here to stay and I don't think it's going anywhere. And we can either redeem it or resist it. And I would rather redeem it because that's where everybody is. And so I'm massively excited about what we're seeing happen in the online space because man, when we're seeing mass amounts of people get baptized and are willing to fly or drive across the country to get baptized at their church, I'm like, okay, something's happening, you know.
It's incredible. So, that's incredible. Good for you. That's cool. I had somebody try to explain to me how you do your online stuff. And they were like, okay, so he does this thing and he starts explaining it to me. But I'm not kidding you. 5 seconds into it, I'm absolutely lost. I'm like, what are you talking about? This doesn't make any sense at all. And he's like, yeah, it's like every phone is its own church. I'm like, what are you talking about? And he's like, yeah, you go in the bar and like it'll be there and you can get there. You can go over here. You can do it. I'm like, this doesn't even make sense. Again, he talks to people like, I'm like, how you are drunk. I have no idea what you're talking about. Like you're in the future. You're talking about the future. All right. That's not, but hearing you say it, yeah, man, that is really cool. That is really cool.
Yeah. And so we keep refining. I mean, excellence has to be there because I mean, the quality that people are watching things in right now. I mean, I went and saw Endgame, which I won't give any spoilers on here, but if you're dumb enough to not watch it yet, you probably deserve to be spoiled. But I went and watched that, and I'm thinking I'm sitting in a theater where they ran and we buy ads in the theater, and they run an ad on the screen, and I'm like, and that just looks so high quality. And then we want to record things on like our camera from 4 years ago and put that on the internet and think people want to be engaged with that. They're not going to. So yeah, you got to invest a little bit, but it's not as much as what people think. People think you got to spend $100,000 to do online.
Right.
Honestly, you don't. Most of us have the technology sitting in our buildings, whether you're a church of 200 or a church of 20,000, most people have the technology and it doesn't take a lot. And I think, honestly, I could be wrong about this, but I think go back to this 5 years later, listen to this recording 5 years from now. I think you're going to see that the trend is going to be, and I don't think it's trendy, I think it's just going to be reality, is the church has to invade the online space. Mm-hmm. And I don't mean just like with cheesy YouTube videos. I mean, like we've got to invade with excellence this space. And I think that's where real redemption is going to start happening in the lives of people. And I think they will gravitate towards brick and mortar, but I don't think it's going to look like what it looks like today. I just don't. Right. You know, I don't think it'll be an either or, but I definitely think it's going to be a hard both and in the time period.
So if we're talking to some guys out there who maybe they're thinking, yeah, but Trevor, you're kind of a techie guy. Maybe you know a lot about this tech stuff, and I don't really know a lot about that. So I can't do any of that. I can't do any of that. What do you say? What do you say to them?
If you've got students in your church, you can do it.
Yeah.
They know every bit of it. And I would say too, if there's resources you're looking for, they can email me or Joey Santos on my staff. I mean, literally Joey he hasn't charged anybody anything, and we're giving out all this great free advice to churches, which this isn't about us making money. This is about people knowing Jesus. So if we can share some nuggets of wisdom with another church to help them get going, man, I just don't give a rip. Like I will give it all away. Yeah. You know, obviously, I mean, they pay, like if they bring him in, they bring him in, you know what I mean? But while he's there, he's not charging for any of his mental capacity. He's like a plane ticket in a hotel room. He's good to go. Most of which we can do over a Skype call with people. We do a lot of Zoom calls, Skype calls. But I mean, there's so many like Extreme Monkeys who we use for our stuff. Like Life Church has free open source like back end stuff that you can do. I mean, it just doesn't cost when I tell you it doesn't cost anything to start, it costs nothing to start.
Right.
And for the average guy that's like, oh, I don't understand social media. Great. You don't have to, because if you've got 10 students in your church, I promise you they can run this. Yeah. And I promise you, if you can't, then that's your job anyhow. Empower people to do what they're good at. You got somebody in your church, like we've got people now, like we've opened a door of volunteerism with our chat rooms on Sunday morning and producing on Sunday morning. Like these people didn't feel like they had a place in the church, and all of a sudden they're like, this is what I do all day long in IT, and now I can sit here and do this on Sunday mornings with my gift set. Right. Because they don't like people anyhow, right? So, but put them in a dark room with a computer, and they're
exactly
awesome.
Right.
You know what I mean?
100%.
You've got people sitting in your churches, whether you're 50 or you're 5,000, that this is their gift set. And if they have the right direction, some people like learn from us. Like we've screwed so many things up. Like, let us tell you how not to do it. I can tell you every way not to do ministry. I've screwed everything up that I can screw up. And yet I'm still surviving. So, I'd rather tell you how not to do it. And so you can do it the right way. And you don't spend money you don't need to spend. Like there's all these places that'll tell you, if you just spend $30,000, you have the greatest. Okay, you could spend $300 and have a pretty good online experience. So, but for me, it's the most amount of people in the shortest amount of time. So again, rescue others by snatching them from the flames of judgment. One of the biggest places of fire is on the internet. You know that. You just shared your own story.
Absolutely right. Yeah.
And because of these stupid things we carry in our pocket, we have access to things we never had. When I was a kid, like talking about porn, man, when I was a kid, you had to work for it. Like you had to find like a dad's magazine, or a buddy's dad had a stash of movies, or like today, literally, you don't have to, like you literally can put your phone and put earbuds in and nobody even knows what you're doing. You know?
Right.
So if we can redeem that space versus resist that space, I think the churches that resist anything online right now, they're starting to die a slow, painful death, because they're going to be totally invalid to the culture around them in the next 5 years.
And I think the other thing that comes with that is small churches. I think a lot of people in small churches, a lot of ministers in small churches assume, for whatever reason, whatever I have to offer to the world at large out there is probably minimal. I probably don't have much.
Yeah, that's such a crock.
My sermon, my music, I don't know. I don't know that I've really got much to offer to put out into the digital world.
And what I say to that is, man, is like I don't know if you feel this way. I feel this way. Like my life could have gone a completely different direction in ministry, and because I never expected to be where I'm at doing what I'm doing.
Right.
And I'd be okay either way. Like I really would be, but just there's these things in ministry's funny. You got to have a little bit of like ability to do some of the things we do. You got to be able to preach. Well, I say that there's some churches where I feel like they might not care about that so much. And that's large and small. I hate the whole us versus them, large and small church conversation, because I'm in this Facebook group, and I don't ever interact because I'll get in trouble and boot it out. But it's mostly preachers from smaller churches, and they just come hard after mega church guys. I always want to jump in. I'm like, no, because then it just proves the point they're making. But the other side of that coin is like, as much as they're like bashing on the mega church guys, man, I watch the guys. Churches much larger than ours, man, their heartbeat is for the guy in the small church, because you're in the trenches. You're having to do stuff I don't even have to think about during the day anymore, and all for the sake of the gospel. And I think some of the best preachers, some of the best teachers, some of the best worship leaders, some of the fill in the blank, whatever the role is, are sitting in churches of 100, 200, 300, and I think they have a lot to offer. And I think they ought to be, because there's digital now, you should be offering the gospel to as many people as you can.
Right.
If you've got more than one follower on the internet, you've got a following. I mean, it's most people have, 100 Facebook followers. Okay, great. Then start posting Facebook Live videos. Like that's why I do it for my office on Sundays. There's people on my Facebook that I went to school with in high school, or I've known from other parts of my life, that don't know Jesus. And that may be the only Jesus they ever see, but they chime in I don't know why they're on Facebook at 7:30 on Sunday morning, probably laying in bed with their phone above their face, watching me. But if I can bring hope, then I'm going to talk hope. Why am I back in the blog world? Because And I got friends that read that don't go to church. So, man, if they get a glimmer of hope and they've been burned by the church in the last 25 years, maybe they'll walk back in somewhere, or they'll join our online campus. That's an easy open door for people. For me, it's like, whether I was in a church of 10,000, 2,000, 200, or 20, I feel like God has given me a voice that's unique to the church, and you do too. And so to anybody listening to this, don't let anybody tell you don't, and don't tell yourself you don't. You have a perspective. God created you to be you, not to be somebody else. The most freeing day of my ministry is when I realized I didn't have to preach like any of the preachers I listened to all the time.
Yeah.
Because I listen to Matt Chandler, and I listen to Francis Chan back in the day. And now I listen to guys outside of the Christian church movement, which I'll probably get an email about that too. But I listen to guys like the Belonging down in Nashville, and just a lot of different places. And the most freeing day was when God told me, he was like, I've already created a Matt Chandler. I've already created a Francis Chan. I created you to be you. Stop comparing yourself to every other preacher. Preach the way I've called you to preach. I was like, oh. And that was also the day I was freed from, I don't save anybody. I'm not a savior. I'm a mouthpiece. I'm not the one that saves. And I think if any guy listening to this that's in ministry, let me free you. You don't have to preach like anybody else. You don't have to lead your church like anybody else. Yeah. Lead your church and preach at your church the way God called you to preach and lead. And then on top of that, realize you saved nobody. So don't stress over how many people you have saved, because you have saved nobody to date, and you will. Salvation is not yours to give or take away. It's just yours to lead towards. And so I just, those are so freeing for me in ministry to go, all right, cool. So now I get to be a rebel with a cause, and I get out here and I get to meet people that most pastors typically don't get to hang out with. I'm sure you're in that same boat. Yep. I get more feel from non-Christians than from Christians. I'm jealous of my friends who are like, man, I'd like to be in ministry. I'm like, I'd like to be in the workplace, because you guys are around it all day long. Like I'm around crazy church people all day. You're around just crazy people all day. I like crazy people, just crazy church people. Yeah. It's a different kind of crazy. And I say that as a sweeping statement. We got a lot of great people in our church. I love my church. Right. I think Bob Russell told me early on, 95% of church is great. 4% is okay, and 1% is downright nasty. Yeah. And he said the problem is we focus on that 1% and forget that there's 95% that's amazing. And,
it's a fact.
And I think that's pretty true. I think those stats work out pretty close to true. Yeah. But yeah, man, it's hard. It's going back to how this thing started. What we do is hard, and don't let anybody tell you that it's not. Don't let anybody tell you that, well, you only work on Sundays. Well, okay, come shadow me for a week. Let's see how that works out for you.
Right.
But in all reality, man, I think for what I want every pastor to hear, everybody that'll hear this podcast is, man, you're not alone. That's the first thing you need to hear. Like it doesn't matter the size of your church. Just what you need is a circle of people around you that got your back. And I would say the size of my church is not indicative on my success. But the health of my soul is indicative on the group around me. And that group is very small, but it's very tight. Mm-hmm. And I know I'm not alone. I can pick up a phone at any point, at any time of the day, and I've got somebody that I know has got my back explicitly. Okay. And half of those are not in my church. The other half are in my church. And if you don't have a healthy eldership, one of two things: either figure out how to get the unhealth out of your eldership, or you're going to have to find another church.
Right.
It's just one of the two, because it's not.
Yeah.
You're not going to shift them over like 10 years. It's just either you got to get the guys that are not healthy out of your eldership and get healthy guys in and start developing them, or you got to find another church. Because I didn't give my life to church politics. I gave my life for helping people find Jesus. And if all you're in is church politics all day long, people aren't finding Jesus. So
it's a fact. That's a fact.
So I just know you're not alone. If you ever need it and you're hearing this, and just get on my website. Email comes straight to me. Email me. I'll walk through life with you. I would love to. As a matter of fact, I got a heart for pastors, and at 40 years old, I got a little less wisdom than I probably ever had in my life, but I feel like I know more, if that makes sense. So
yeah. Well, one of the joys of kind of getting past some of those early just run and gun ministry days and moving into the 40 is you tend to feel like, okay, now I feel like I have a voice. Now I feel like I've earned my right to speak and my right to talk about stuff. Not just through the, Paul and Timothy, let nobody look down on you because you're young, but now into the space of, I've blistered in the sun a little bit, working on me, working on this church, investing in lives. So I've got a thing that I can say. the beauty of it is when you get to that spot and you say, I've got a thing I can say, you also have the confidence to say, and you know what? That's not an area that I need to concern myself with. And that's not an area I need to concern myself with. And I need to turn the volume down on some of these people. I need to turn the volume up on some of these people. These are people I need to get very honest with. These are some people I need to keep a little distance on, and on all that's okay. I appreciate everything you said for listeners, just being able to focus in on, don't get buried. Don't get buried underneath, what can be a heavy, heavy load if you're not careful. You can really, really struggle underneath that. That's pretty heavy. It's pretty heavy.
Yeah, it's very heavy, and I think that's the weight most guys carry, and you don't have to. And I think getting comfortable in your own skin is so key. And then just not being scared to, don't be a jerk, but don't be scared to tell people the truth when they need to hear. I mean, speak the truth in love. But I think, what was it? Caleb, I don't know if you know Caleb Kaltenbach or not.
Sure.
He wrote a book called Messy Grace, and Caleb is a good friend of mine. And he talks about this tension between truth and grace. There's he takes a rubber band and stretches it across his fingers, talks about this tension. And if all you ever have is grace, then you become very tolerant of anything. And if all you have is truth, you become very legalistic. But the tension between those two things is how you love people. Love is the tension. And I think you got to be graceful, but you got to tell the truth. And if you really love people, tell them the truth. And if you're really going to tell people the truth, then you better love them while telling them, because that's where the grace has got to come in. But I think a lot of pastors are scared to tell the truth because they're scared they'll lose their jobs. And
I agree.
That's just a horrible space to live in, man. If I were scared I'm going to lose my job for telling the truth, man, fire me, because I'll go find another job. I'd rather tell the truth and find another job.
but when you're young and you get into that place and you think, man, I just don't want that. I mean, I've been fired a couple of times, and I'm telling you, getting fired were the greatest things that have ever happened to me. I mean, that helped.
But in the moment, it sucks.
It sucks. It's terrible. I mean, you're beat up. You feel like a failure, all that stuff. But the other side of that brings so much more health and so much more life to you, to where you walk away and you think to yourself, man, I did not know how much pressure was on me, and I don't have that pressure anymore. I'm never walking back into a situation like that ever again. The minute I feel that pressure, I'm bouncing. I'm not doing it. I'm sticking around,
Yeah. Well, and when you're young, you don't know what you don't know, right? I mean,
yeah, you're right.
You just don't know what you don't know. And that's why now I kind of Bible colleges ask me to come in and teach sometimes. And I'm like, let me tell you everything they're not going to teach you here. Because when I was in Bible college, they never gave me a class on, so here's what happens when you got an elder in your grill. Here's what happens when the church decides that they don't like you anymore. Here's let me just walk you through the hell of ministry so you can get, David says, as I walk through the valley of the valley, not as I take up residence there and build a house. You're going to go through it. It's not if, it's when. But you got to keep going through. Don't take up residence in the Gehenna of life. I mean, that's what he was talking about. The Gehenna Valley in Israel is what he was looking at. And it's don't dwell there. You're gonna have to go through it. Everybody's got to go through it. But through is the key word. There's another side to this, and what you can't see at 20, what you can't see at 25 or 30, even 35, and what I can't see at 40 is what 60 is going to look like.
Absolutely.
But I definitely at 20 could not see the crap I was going to have to go through to get to 40. And I thought some of these things are gosh, I'm never going to recover. And God's like, that's a blip, bro. You realize you're going to be so much better off in the long run if you deal with this now and not when you're 40.
Absolutely right.
That whole and I know we heard all this stuff when we were 20. And we're like, those guys are idiots.
What a bunch of morons.
Yeah, I'm not going to be that way. And you're like, crap, I'm that way. Dang it. So, thanks for letting me ramble through some of this stuff, man.
No, man, I appreciate it. This stuff is cathartic. I mean, it's really good to hear somebody else kind of dump their soul out a little bit on this kind of thing. And I appreciate the encouragement. I mean, that's always the last question that I ask. How can you encourage other guys that are going to hear this? People who are in ministry who, man, bivocational, driving a bus, being a plumber, doing construction, and then trying to preach a sermon and thinking to themselves man, I just don't, how do I get the time to do this thing? I'm buried underneath this,
Bro, I like that right there. That's unsung heroes of the church to me, man. The guys that are bivocationally, they're working 50 hours a week somewhere else, and then they're preaching, and they're probably slaying it when they preach, but they don't have the time to put into the vision and strategy things that we get to do all day.
Yep.
and yet here they are, man, like helping people find Jesus. And man, and I know there's probably people that would minimize one versus the other, but I'm like, man, for me, that guy is just as important as the stage I stand on Sunday morning and preach. I get privileged to do what I do, but man, that guy for me is the guy that I'm like, I want to know that guy. Like, I want to learn from that guy because he's doing something I'm not sure I could do. If I had to hustle, I could hustle. That's not a problem. But, but to go do what some of these guys are doing, it blows my mind. And I'm like, that's a guy I want to talk to. That's the guy I want to spend time with. Because that's the guy to learn from, in my opinion. You know, because honestly, the average church is not a mega church. And we've done something stupid in Bible college. I know we're trying to get off this call, but we've done something stupid in Bible college and I don't think it's been intentional, but we've just planted the seed that unless you make it to this level, you're not really successful. And that's just not true. That's just not a true statement. That's why when we got some young staff coming in, I have to remind them constantly, this isn't normal. Like, this isn't your normal church. And honestly, we're going to ruin church for you in a lot of ways, because if you ever leave here and have to go somewhere that's not this size, you're right. Then all of a sudden you're not, in your mind, this isn't successful. And I'm like, it's a crock. It's not true. Right. I know churches of 200 that are healthier than churches of 3,000. I know churches with pastors that are leading and preaching that are better preachers in churches of 200 than guys that are preaching on stages of 5,000 people. Your size is not indicative to what God can do through you. And that's why the online space, to tie that all in a bow, that's why this is so key, because more people can hear your voice in a shorter amount of time than ever before. And I'm probably talking more to the middle-aged pastor that's sitting here going, man, I've been working 20 years and this is all I'm leading. Stop saying this is all I'm leading. This is what you get to lead. This is what you get to do. Be faithful with little. God will give you more. I promise you. You know, and if I'm unfaithful what he's given me, he will give me less. Like, but don't let your more be indicative on the number of seats that are filled in your building. God has given you a voice. Use it. Use it. You don't have to be bullhorn guy at the stadium to tell people turn or burn. Like, don't be that guy. That guy's an idiot. But you can get on the internet and you can redeem instead of resist, and people will be excited to hear your voice. If we're really honest, like the guys and I think the people you have on here are going to be real honest. But I think when we start getting honest as pastors, I think the world wants to hear. And I think that's why this is so. Keep doing this, man. This is important. Then when we kick off our Rebel Yell podcast together, we'll just talk about all the rebellious things.
I got an RSS feed with your name on it. So,
well, that may actually be the same on my side of this screen right now. So, in all seriousness, man, we need to talk through that. That'd be fun.
We'll do it. My phone number's in an email.
Awesome.
So
we'll hook up.
Shoot me yours. We'll get together.
We'll do it, bro. I love it. That's great.
Trevor DeVage, thank you so much. Appreciate it.